What do you do when the one person you're supposed to trust treats you like nothing more than a nuisance? My name is Willow, and I'm here to share a story about how my life changed because of my awful stepmother, Meredith. From the moment she stepped into our lives, things were never the same. She made it clear she wasn't interested in being a mother, and every day after that felt like a battle to keep my place in the family. Little did she know, I had my own plan. Stay tuned to hear how I turned the tables and what happened when I finally took control. Don't forget to subscribe and follow for more stories of strength and standing up for yourself. When my dad, Harrison, first introduced me to Meredith, she made it clear from the start that she didn't want to be a mother to me. She said, "Don't think I'm going to be your mom. You're just my husband's daughter, nothing more. You're a teenager, so don't expect me to do anything for you." I tried to remain calm and replied, "That's fine, Meredith. I can take care of myself. I just want my dad to be happy. I won't get in the way." Her response was cruel. "You're already in the way, you little witch. Don't act smart with me. Once you turn 17, I'll make sure you're out of our lives so I can have Harrison all to myself." The conversation quickly turned ugly. Meredith said some truly awful things about me and my late mother. My dad, Harrison, had been a widower for years after my mother passed away when I was just 7 years old. I miss her every day, and it took my dad a long time before he even considered dating again. That's why, despite her harsh words, I never told him what Meredith said or did. I didn't want to hurt him. Looking back, I realize it was a huge mistake to stay quiet. Meredith turned into a nightmare after marrying my dad. Even he was shocked by how she treated me. Meredith targeted me constantly, trying everything she could to get me out of the house. She made it clear that she hated kids and never wanted me around. She had never mentioned any of this before they started dating. When my dad refused to abandon me, she went to extreme lengths to make my life unbearable. She ruined her own cooking and blamed me for it. "Look at what your daughter did, Harrison. She ruined my dinner because I refused to cook for her. One day, she's going to poison me." See, Dad would then ask me, "Willow, what do you have to say about this?" "Dad, I swear I had nothing to do with it. I was in my room eating takeout. I wasn't even home when you came back," I tried to explain. Meredith would interrupt. "Oh my God, she's lying, Harrison. You need to get rid of her before she kills me." This was just one example of the chaos Meredith had caused for the past 5 years. It all stemmed from too much salt in her food, which she had added herself just to blame me. It was absurd, but my dad believed me because I had years of proof that Meredith was manipulative and deceitful. She did much worse, cutting off my phone line, locking me out of the house for hours, taking my car keys on an important test day, and even throwing away a project I had worked on for an entire week. Dad tried his best to make Meredith understand that her actions weren't okay, but she never listened. She would act sweet for a few days, only to turn around and do something awful again. By the time Meredith had been living with us for a year, I had started working and paying for my own expenses. I wanted to avoid her interference in my life as much as possible. Dad was disappointed, but I assured him it was good for me to have my own money. I didn't want him to feel guilty about my independence. Meredith, who was a stay-at-home wife, considered my dad's money as her own and wasn't willing to spend any on me, not even for basic needs. I tried to stay out of her way, hoping she'd leave me alone, but she never got the hint. She was relentless, determined to get rid of me from the house, but she had no idea what was coming. The big drama happened a few weeks after my 17th birthday. Since then, Meredith had been in a great mood, often singing happily around the house. I knew why she was so cheerful. She thought she could finally get rid of me. Little did she know, I had overheard her talking to her friend on the phone about how she planned to kick me out. I was aware of her plan, but she had no idea what was coming for her. One day, I came home from work and saw my stuff packed in my room. Instead of being upset, I was amused. I said, "Hey, Meredith, why is my stuff packed and waiting in my room? Are we going on vacation?" "Don't act so smart, Willow." "I hope you remember my words," she snapped back. "I told you that once you turned 17, I would make you leave." "Well, now it's time for you to go. I've decided to be nice and pack your things to make it easier for you." "You want to kick me out of my house?" Oh no, Willow. This is my house and I don't need to keep you here anymore. I'll deal with Harrison later, but you were definitely leaving. Meredith had a smug look on her face. She was happy with herself. She was already thinking about what to do with my room, but I said, "Not so fast, Meredith. Karma is coming for you." I calmly took some papers from my bag and gave them to her. She looked confused, so I smirked and said, "I think you should look at these papers first, Meredith. I've been meaning to give them to you for a while. It's good you mentioned eviction today. It reminded me of these documents." "What are these papers? Why do I need to read them?" she asked. "Why don't you take a look and find out?" I replied. Meredith sat down and started to read the papers I had given her. At first, she looked confused. Then her face changed to shock and disbelief. She looked at me, then back at the papers. Her expression turned angry. "Is this an eviction notice in my name? What the hell, Willow? What does this mean?" she asked. "It means I want you out of my house in a month, you know, the usual thing an eviction notice means," I said. "You can't serve me eviction papers. You can't do that. This is my house, and I'm the only one who can kick people out," she yelled. No, Meredith, this is my house and always has been. My dad was just a caretaker who held it for me until I turned 17. Now that I'm 17, the house is mine. I recently finished the paperwork," I explained. No, that's impossible. Harrison can't just give you this house. This is our marital property, and he can't give it to you without asking me." She protested. "How is this a marital property, Meredith? Dad had this house long before you were around. I guess he didn't tell you that it belonged to my maternal grandparents. They left it to me and had Dad take care of it until I was old enough," I said. "I turned 17 just a few weeks ago." No, you must be lying to me. This can't be true. You're trying to scam me and kick me out of the house. Wait till your father hears about this. He will kick you out instead," Meredith yelled. She made the mistake of involving my father, forgetting that she never asked him if she could kick me out. Even though the house technically belonged to him, she should have at least consulted him before making any decisions about me. She knew he would say no, so she tried to go behind his back, but in her haste, she forgot this important detail and ended up dragging Dad into it. I wasn't complaining it worked out better for me this way. Dad came downstairs, responding to the commotion, and asked, "Whoa, calm down, Meredith. Why are you yelling like that? What's going on?" "Why wouldn't I be yelling? Your daughter is making wild accusations again. She says this house is hers and now she's kicking me out," Meredith shouted. Dad turned to me, asking, "Willow, what's going on? I need to know the truth." I knew my dad would ask for my side. He's a fair father who always listens to both sides, even when Meredith tries to dominate the conversation. He would never just take her side without hearing me out first, which was something Meredith resented. She always expected him to be on her side, regardless of what was right. They'd fought about this before, but Dad insisted on fairness, which is why he was asking for my side now. I explained, "Meredith called me down and said she was kicking me out. She told me I couldn't stay here anymore. I overheard her talking about it on the phone, so I decided to turn the tables. I gave her an eviction notice." Dad's face turned serious as he turned to Meredith. "What the hell, Meredith? Who gave you permission to try and kick my daughter out? We never talked about this. Why am I just hearing about it now?" Meredith's face shifted from shock to panic, realizing she had made a mistake. She'd underestimated me and was now trying to cover her tracks. In classic Meredith fashion, she became defensive, snapping, "Your daughter's an adult now, Harrison. She turned 17 and we've been letting her stay here without rent for a month. Most parents kick their kids out when they turn 17. Willow needs to learn responsibility and start living on her own." "That's for me to decide, Meredith. You're not her parent. You've never been involved in any of the decisions regarding Willow's life. How did you think it was okay to decide when she should leave? That's not your place." "Harrison, I've put up with Willow's teenage years, but now that she's an adult, she has to go. I won't let her stay in my house anymore." "Who said this is your house? Where is the deed that shows this house is in your name?" Meredith stammered. "Well, it's your house, so I should have equal rights to it as your wife. This is my house too, and I won't allow Willow to stay here anymore. She needs to leave." "This is not your house, Meredith. Even if it were, you have no right to it. This house belongs to Willow. It's in her name." Meredith went white as a sheet. She never expected Dad to back me up. She always operated under the assumption that everything was hers, simply because she said so. Hearing Dad's stance was a complete shock to her. She started crying, her voice cracking. "Why would you say that, Harrison?" "Because it's the truth. The house belongs to Willow. Why is that so hard to understand?" "You gave Willow the house without talking to me? How could you do that, Harrison? I'm your wife, and you should have discussed this with me first. This isn't right. You had no problem going behind my back and trying to kick my daughter out. Why can't I do the same, Meredith? Talk about double standards. There was nothing to discuss. This house was always meant for Willow. I was just holding on to it until she turned 17. The house was transferred to her name recently." Meredith finally understood that we weren't lying. Dad even offered to show her the paperwork if she needed proof. She was too stunned to argue coherently. All she could say was, "You deceived me, Harrison. I thought this house was yours. You lied to me. This isn't fair." "I never lied to you, Meredith. You never asked whose house this was. When we got married, we signed a prenup that said our personal assets stay personal." "Oh my God, this can't be true. You should have told me, Harrison. Now Willow is throwing us out. Look at how ungrateful your daughter is, Harrison." "I'm not throwing you out, Meredith. That's just for you. You won't get to live in my house anymore. I might have let you stay, but after you tried to kick me out, I changed my mind. You're the one who has to leave. If you kick me out, your dad will follow too. We're a couple. He won't leave his wife." My father laughed out loud. He had been thinking about leaving Meredith for a while, but he wasn't sure. Today made the decision easy for him. He said, "Actually, no, Meredith. I'm not following you. I will stay here and take care of my daughter. I've been thinking about divorce for a while, and what you did today sealed the deal. I'll be filing tomorrow. Be ready for it." "Wait, are you going to divorce me? You want to leave me for your daughter? You can't do that." "Yes, I can, Meredith." "Did you think I'd forgive you for tormenting my daughter for 4 years? Absolutely not. I thought you might change, but I see now you'll always be toxic. I don't want someone like that in my or my daughter's life." Meredith stepped back as if she had been hurt. She never expected a divorce so soon. My dad is usually a quiet man who doesn't do anything drastic. This was very unlike him. He was mad, and you could see it on his face. He didn't shout, but his tone showed how angry he was. This made Meredith even more anxious. She started arguing with my dad, and I decided to leave them and go to my room. Dad and Meredith fought for an hour, with Meredith shouting and crying while my father calmly explained his reasons. After the argument, Dad came to my room. He seemed a bit sad and wouldn't look me in the eye. He sat down and said, "Willow, I know I need to apologize to you. I'm sorry, dear. I should have done a better job of protecting you from Meredith. I thought being fair and avoiding fights would make things better. I was wrong and made things worse for you." "You don't have to apologize, Dad. I know you loved Meredith, and she wasn't like this when you married her. People change, and it can take time to understand these changes." "Wow, you've really grown up. I wish I had handled things differently. I brought a mad woman into our lives." "Well, what's done is done. I forgive you, Dad. You tried your best, and I'm not upset." "Do you really want to divorce Meredith?" "I won't be mad if you don't. I would understand." "Girl, I'm not living with that crazy woman anymore. I'm done. Her true colors shocked me too much to act sooner. I don't want her in my life anymore. I had a feeling something was wrong with Meredith, which is why I made the prenup. I was worried she'd mess up your future and cause money problems, so I thought this was the best way. See, you did think about me too. You deserve to be happy, Dad. That's all I want. If Meredith doesn't mean anything to you anymore, it's best to separate." I spent a lot of time assuring my dad that he was not a bad parent. He did a lot for me, and I needed to make him believe that too. I won't lie, I was super happy that my dad was finally getting rid of that crazy woman, Meredith. She wasn't the right person for him and shouldn't stay married to him after everything she did over the years. The talk with my dad went well, and he went to the guest room to sleep that night. I finally felt peaceful knowing that Meredith would soon be out of our lives for good. It felt great to teach her a lesson. I hoped she would remember this for the rest of her life. The real surprise came the next morning when I found Meredith acting way too nice and caring towards me. She was in the kitchen making me breakfast and acting like I was the most important person to her. Even Dad was giving her a strange look and looked at me with confusion. When breakfast was over, I said, "Thanks for breakfast, Meredith, but you don't have to do this anymore. I can make my own food, as I have for the last 7 years. No need to change things all of a sudden." "What nonsense, Willow! I'm happy to do this for you. Eating together can bring us closer as a family," she replied. "What's the point? We won't be a family much longer. You should have done this years ago. It's too late now." "Oh, come on, Harrison. Don't be so hard on me. I'm trying. I can make this work. I'll start being a better parent to Willow. We'll be the best mother-daughter duo ever, right, Willow?" I could see right through Meredith's scheme. She had been cornered and was spending the entire night plotting her next move. But I knew better than to trust her. Looking at Dad, it was clear he wasn't buying it. Either he seemed more amused than concerned. Meredith was anxiously waiting for my response, so I decided to make my stance clear. "I don't think so, Meredith. First of all, I'm 17. I'm 17 and don't need a new parent. I pay my own bills and will be heading off to college soon. Secondly, you are not and will never be my mother. That word just doesn't suit you." Her expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly gathered herself. "Willow, I'm sorry for being so harsh with you before. You need to give people a chance. We could have a happy family if you just give me a chance. This would also help strengthen my marriage with your dad." Dad, without missing a beat, replied, "Meredith, you've got a few months left in this marriage, and I don't know what you think you're trying to strengthen. If it's an attempt to stay in this house, it's not going to work. You're being kicked out, and I'm divorcing you anyway. The damage is done. There's no point in pretending to be all innocent and sorry now. I know you better than that." Meredith realized her new approach wasn't working, and it was clear she had run out of options. She couldn't threaten to ruin Dad financially due to the prenup she signed when they married. She had no leverage left. All she had left was to beg and cry, hoping to win some sympathy. She sobbed uncontrollably, pleading with me not to kick her out. She begged me to talk to Dad and ask him to reconsider his decision. Then she turned to Dad, begging for his forgiveness, asking him to reconsider the divorce. The entire day turned into an agonizing ordeal. Meredith clung to us, begging and pleading for mercy. Since both Dad and I were off work that day, we had no choice but to endure her desperate attempts to change our minds. She trailed behind us, tears streaming down her face, her voice shaking with desperation. Dad eventually had to step out to contact his lawyer and start the divorce proceedings. But even when he left, Meredith's pleas didn't stop. She tried to get me to intervene on her behalf, but I remained firm. When Dad returned, looking visibly tired from dealing with the drama, he informed Meredith that he had already filed for divorce. Her face drained of color when she heard this, realizing that her attempts to sway us were futile. The next few days were a repetitive cycle of Meredith's emotional breakdowns. She fluctuated between crying and putting on a cheerful front, hoping to win us over with kindness, but it was too late for that. Within a week, Meredith received the divorce papers. Dad's lawyer had them delivered to her, and her reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. The weight of the reality hit her hard, and she stopped her begging and crying. She finally realized her efforts had been in vain. The cold truth of her situation began to settle in. Dad and I sat her down and explained that she would need to find a job if she wanted to have a place to stay and a lawyer for her divorce. Meredith, still holding on to the hope that somehow she could fix things, promised she would find a way to support herself. She still believed she could change our minds if she just tried hard enough. She kept saying that she would prove herself and make things right, but we both knew it was too late. As the days passed, Meredith's presence in the house became more and more unbearable. She would try to engage in conversations, acting as if nothing had happened, but it was clear that neither Dad nor I wanted to have anything to do with her anymore. The tension in the house was palpable, and every interaction with her felt forced and uncomfortable. Finally, the month came to an end, and Meredith was still holding on to the hope that we would let her stay. She kept her belongings packed, waiting for a last-minute change of heart from us, but when the time came, there was no reprieve. We had been clear about our intentions from the start, and now it was time to follow through. Meredith was given a firm deadline to leave the house. Dad and I stood by watching as she gathered her things. She tried one last time to plead with us, her eyes filled with tears and desperation, but we remained steadfast. Meredith's belongings were taken out and she was escorted out of the house. She looked back at us one last time, hoping for a sign of mercy, but there was none. As the door closed behind her, a wave of relief washed over me. The house felt lighter, freer, without the constant tension and negativity that Meredith brought. Dad and I shared a moment of quiet understanding, knowing that this was the right decision. We had endured enough, and now it was time to move forward, leaving Meredith and her manipulations behind. She put up a scene when we asked her to leave, but after Dad threatened her with legal action, she finally walked out, tears streaming down her face. I heard she moved in with some friends, as her own family had made it clear they didn't want her around anymore. When she left, all the negativity went with her, and the house began to feel like a home again. It's been over 3 years since that happened. I'm now in college, conveniently close to home. Dad successfully divorced Meredith, and although he claims he's not interested in settling down, he's enjoying some companionship from time to time. Life at home has been peaceful ever since Meredith left, and Dad and I have grown much closer. We often laugh about the chaos that once filled our lives, reflecting on how much better things are now. As for Meredith, the last I heard, she was living in a small flat with a few roommates. She's struggling to make ends meet since she lacks many skills or qualifications. Meredith now works a minimum wage job and is barely getting by, living a far cry from the life she tried to control while she was in our home. A few months ago, I saw her from a distance at the grocery store. She looked exhausted and had aged considerably. Her hair was messy, and dark circles under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights. She looked nothing like the confident woman who once tried to take control of our lives. It was clear that life had worn her down, and she was no longer the powerful figure she once tried to project. Seeing her like that made me realize karma had caught up with her. She tried to manipulate and control us, but in the end, she had nothing to show for it. I felt a sense of relief knowing that she was no longer part of our lives and that we were free from her toxicity. The house, once filled with tension and arguments, now felt warm and welcoming. Dad and I had found peace. We've become closer, and we often talk about how much better things are now, how thankful we are to have each other. Dad even started picking up new hobbies like gardening and cooking things he never had time for when Meredith was around. We've created a loving, peaceful home, full of laughter. Meredith's departure was a blessing for both of us. It gave us the space to rebuild our lives and focus on what truly matters. No more constant drama or manipulation. Instead, we're enjoying life's simpler pleasures, making new memories, and cherishing the time we have together. As for Meredith, I hope she's learned from her mistakes. Life hasn't been easy for her, and I believe she's finally realizing that happiness can't be built on lies and deceit. The last I heard, she was still struggling to get by, working hard just to survive. I think she's finally coming to terms with the consequences of her actions. I don't wish any harm on her. I just hope she can turn things around and learn to live with integrity. I hope her struggles teach her valuable lessons, helping her grow into a better person. Everyone deserves a chance to change, to grow, and improve their life. Looking back, I'm grateful for everything we went through. The challenges we faced made us stronger and brought us closer together. Dad and I have become a great team, appreciating each other more than ever. We've built a life full of love, respect, and understanding, and for that, I am truly thankful. What do you do when a toxic presence tries to tear apart your family, and you're the one who has to protect what's left? For years, Willow lived under the shadow of her stepmother, Meredith. The cruelty, the manipulation, and the endless battles slowly wore her down, but something changed when Meredith made her boldest move yet. She underestimated Willow, assuming she could still control the situation and push her out of the house she called home. But Willow wasn't the naive teenager Meredith thought she was. She had been paying attention, gathering the courage to stand up for herself. And when the time came, Willow fought back strategically, calmly, and with purpose. When Meredith's plans finally came crashing down, it wasn't just about kicking her out of the house. It was about reclaiming her life and her space, a space that had been occupied by someone who had never valued her. Willow's response to Meredith's threats wasn't just a victory over the stepmother's manipulation, it was a moment of empowerment. She proved that no one, not even family, had the right to push her down or take away her worth. And when the dust settled, Willow realized something profound. The power she had been seeking from her family could only truly come from herself. The calm strength that radiated from her wasn't just about getting Meredith out of the house. It was about realizing that her true worth was never tied to Meredith's approval, her dad's favoritism, or anyone else's validation. So, what happens when you stop caring about what others think and stand up for your own happiness? Willow's journey is a testament to the fact that sometimes the best way to move forward is to leave behind the people who drain your energy and focus on building a life that reflects your own values. This was Willow's moment to truly reclaim her power, and the result was a life filled with peace, respect, and love. What do you think? Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to control or manipulate you? How did you handle it? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of strength and resilience.
I never expected a charity gala to change my life, but that's exactly what happened on the night my fiancé's father collapsed. I was in the middle of analyzing gene sequences at my lab when Jasper's call came through. "Marley, you need to come to St. Michael's Hospital right now." His voice cracked. He just went down during his speech. They're saying it might be his heart. I'm Marley Finch, and until that moment, my biggest concern had been finishing my research paper on genetic markers before the deadline. Now, as I rushed through the hospital's automatic doors 20 minutes later, that seemed laughably unimportant. The emergency room waiting area was a scene of controlled chaos. Jasper's mother, Lorraine, paced in her designer gown, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching her phone. She barely acknowledged my presence with a slight nod. Typical. Jasper stood when he saw me, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. "They're running tests," he said, pulling me into a tight hug. "God, Marley, One minute he was thanking everyone for supporting the foundation, and the next. "He's in good hands," I assured him, though my stomach churned at the sight of his pale face. I'd never seen Jasper this shaken before. A doctor emerged from the treatment area, her expression grave. "Mrs. Caldwell, your husband's condition is critical. His kidneys are failing, and we've detected severe damage to his liver." Lorraine's hand flew to her throat. "But how? Reggie's always been healthy. We're still running tests, but right now our primary concern is finding a compatible donor. Given the urgency, family members would be our best option." "I'll do it," Jasper said immediately. "Whatever he needs." The doctor nodded. "We'll need to run compatibility tests. If you'll come with me." As Jasper followed the doctor, Lorraine finally turned her full attention to me. "This is a family matter," she said, her voice low and clipped. "Perhaps you should head home." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was my mom, Evelyn. "Everything okay, honey? You left the apartment in such a rush." "Reggie Caldwell's in the hospital," I said, moving away from Lorraine. "It's pretty serious." There was a long pause. "Oh." Just that one syllable. But something in my mother's voice made me frown. "Do they know what's wrong?" "Organ failure. They're testing Jasper now for compatibility." Another pause. "Marley, maybe you should." "Dr. Anderson to emergency, stat." The overhead announcement cut through our conversation. I watched as medical staff rushed toward the treatment area. "Mom, I have to go. I'll call you later." I hung up just as Jasper returned, looking confused. "They're saying something's weird with my blood work. They need to run more tests." My research brain kicked in. "What kind of weird?" "I don't know. Something about blood types not matching up right." He ran his hands through his hair. I can barely think straight. As a geneticist, that detail snagged my attention. Blood types follow clear inheritance patterns. It's basic genetics. But before I could ask more questions, alarms started blaring from Reggie's room. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical terms and worried conversations. By morning, Reggie was stable but critical. Jasper had fallen asleep in an uncomfortable chair, and Lorraine had retreated to make phone calls. I sat there, watching the sunrise through the window, when Felicity, Jasper's aunt, arrived. She took one look at the scene and went pale. "How bad?" she whispered. He needs a transplant, I said. They're having trouble finding a match. Felicity's eyes darted to Jasper's sleeping form, then back to me. No match yet. Something about her tone made me look at her more closely. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Is there something I should know? I asked quietly. She straightened her shoulders. No, of course not. I should go check on my sister. But as she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed the tip of something much bigger. Between my mother's odd reaction, Jasper's blood work issues, and now Felicity's strange behavior, my scientific mind was starting to piece together a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. After 36 hours at the hospital, Jasper finally agreed to come home and rest. The drive back to our apartment was silent, heavy with unspoken worries. I kept thinking about those blood test results, but every time I opened my mouth to ask about them, I saw the exhaustion in Jasper's face and stopped myself. Our apartment felt different somehow. The engagement photos on the walls seemed to mock us with their carefree smiles. Jasper headed straight for the shower while I called my mom. I'm coming over, she said before I could protest. You both need a proper meal, and I've got leftover lasagna. 20 minutes later, my mother arrived with enough food to feed an army. She took one look at Jasper, freshly showered but still looking lost, and went into full nurse mode. Sit, she commanded. When was the last time you ate something that wasn't from a vending machine? Jasper managed a weak smile. I honestly can't remember, Evelyn. As my mother busied herself in the kitchen, I noticed how her hands shook slightly while handling the dishes. Something was off. Mom was usually rock solid in a crisis. It's what made her such a great nurse. The doctors say Dad's stable for now, Jasper said, picking at his food. But without a compatible donor. My mother dropped a fork. The clatter made us both jump. Sorry, she muttered, but her face had gone pale. Just tired. Long shift yesterday. Before I could question her reaction, Jasper's phone rang. It was Lorraine. Yes, Mother, he said, his voice tightening. No, I don't think. Yes, I understand, but... He pinched the bridge of his nose. Fine. We'll be there in an hour. What's wrong? I asked after he hung up. Mother's organizing a family meeting at their house. Says we need to discuss arrangements, while Dad's incapacitated. He looked at me apologetically. She wants you there too. The Caldwell mansion always made me feel small, but today it felt suffocating. Lorraine had gathered the family in the formal living room, all crystal chandeliers and antique furniture that nobody actually sat on. Felicity was already there, perched on the edge of a Victorian settee like she might bolt at any moment. She barely met my eyes when we walked in. Jasper, darling. Lorraine swooped in, air-kissing his cheeks. And Marley. Her pause before my name spoke volumes. I heard voices from the study. Lorraine's lawyer, apparently, discussing power of attorney. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but paused in the hallway when I heard my name. That girl is becoming a problem, Lorraine was saying. A scientist? From that background? Really, Felicity, you know what Reggie would want for Jasper. Lorraine, now isn't the time. It's exactly the time. With Reggie incapacitated, we need to protect the family's interests. That includes making sure Jasper doesn't make any unfortunate decisions. My hands clenched into fists. I dealt with Lorraine's thinly veiled contempt for years, but this was different. This felt calculated. There you are. Jasper's voice made me jump. He frowned at my expression. Everything okay? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from the hospital lab. I'd called in a favor from a colleague to look at Jasper's blood work. Results don't make sense, the text read. Patient's blood type impossible given listed parents. Might want to double-check family history. My stomach dropped. I looked at Jasper, at his familiar features that I'd always thought came from Reggie. But now, Marley. Jasper touched my arm. You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired, I lied, pocketing my phone. Maybe we should go home. Not yet. Lorraine appeared in the hallway. The lawyer needs to discuss the foundation's succession plans. Jasper, come with me. Marley, perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting out here. As they disappeared into the study, I caught Felicity watching me. The guilt in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Something was very wrong with the Caldwell family tree, and I was beginning to suspect it had roots in my own past. The scientist in me needed answers, But the woman who loved Jasper was terrified of what those answers might reveal. The lab results haunted me for days. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work, and definitely couldn't look Jasper in the eye without feeling like I was betraying him somehow. Finally, I called Tess and asked her to meet me at our usual coffee spot. "You look like hell," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. I pushed my laptop toward her. "Look at these blood type results. Tell me I'm not crazy." Tess, a medical researcher herself, studied the screen. Her eyebrows shot up. "This can't be right. If these are Jasper's results, and Reggie's his father." She trailed off, frowning. "Exactly. It's genetically impossible." "Holy shit." Tess leaned back. "Does Jasper know? How am I supposed to tell him?" "Hey, honey. By the way, the man you're trying to save might not actually be your father." The barista brought our drinks, and I noticed my hands shaking as I reached for my cup. "There's more," I said quietly. "My mom's been acting weird ever since Reggie collapsed. And yesterday I found this." I pulled out an old photograph I discovered while searching through Mom's storage boxes. It showed a much younger version of her at what looked like a company party. She was standing next to Reggie Caldwell, and they were looking at each other in a way that made my stomach turn. "No way," Tess whispered. My phone buzzed. Another text from Lorraine about wedding planning. She'd been oddly insistent about moving up the date, claiming we should do it while Reggie was still well enough to attend. "She knows something," I said. "Lorraine's been pushing hard to either break us up or rush us to the altar." "Why?" "Maybe she's worried you'll figure it out." Tess took another look at the photo. "When was this taken?" 30 years ago. Mom was working as a nurse at Reggie's first store location. Just then my phone rang. It was Jasper. "You need to come to the hospital," he said, his voice tight. "Mother's trying to convince Dad to change his will while he's on medication. It's getting ugly." I arrived to find Lorraine and Felicity in a heated argument outside Reggie's room. Jasper stood between them, looking lost. "He's not thinking clearly," Lorraine was saying. "The medication is keeping him alive," Felicity shot back. "You can't use that as an excuse to." They fell silent when they saw me. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "Family matters," she said pointedly. "I am family," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. "Or I will be soon." "Will you?" Lorraine's smile was razor sharp. "Are you sure about that?" "Mother," Jasper warned, but I was already moving past them into Reggie's room. He looked worse than before, pale against the hospital sheets. His eyes opened when I approached. "Marley," he said weakly, "I need to tell you." "Not now, darling," Lorraine interrupted, suddenly beside me. "You need your rest." But Reggie grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Your mother," he started. "That's enough." Lorraine's voice cracked like a whip. Felicity stepped forward. "Lorraine, maybe it's time. Get out." Lorraine pointed at the door. "All of you out." As we filed into the hallway, I caught Felicity's arm. What was he trying to tell me about my mother? She pulled away, but not before I saw tears in her eyes. "Ask Evelyn about the summer of '93, she whispered. "Ask her about the company picnic." Back in the hallway, Jasper was staring at his phone. "The lab sent over more test results," he said. "They're saying..." He looked up at me, confusion clouding his features. "They're saying I can't be a donor because there's no genetic match." "How is that possible?" Behind him, I saw Lorraine's face go white. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew she'd been keeping this secret for 30 years. The truth was right there, waiting to destroy everything, and I was the one holding the match. I spent 3 days avoiding Jasper's calls while I tried to figure out what to do with the truth burning a hole in my pocket. The old photo of Mom and Reggie sat on my desk like a ticking bomb, while dozens of unanswered messages filled my phone. Finally, Jasper showed up at my lab. "You can't just disappear on me," he said, his voice tight with hurt. "Not with everything that's happening." I couldn't meet his eyes. Instead, I stared at the genetic analysis on my computer screen, the one that proved what I'd suspected since that day in the hospital. "Talk to me, Marley. What's going on?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Lorraine's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call, but seconds later, a text appeared. "We need to discuss what you think you know." "Why is my mother texting you?" Jasper asked, frowning at my phone. "Because she's trying to protect her lies," I muttered, then immediately regretted it when I saw his expression. What lies? The lab door opened, and Tess walked in, freezing when she saw us. Oh, sorry, I didn't. No, stay, I said quickly. Having her there made me braver somehow. I need to show Jasper something anyway. My hands shook as I pulled up the blood type analysis. The reason you can't be a donor for Reggie. It's not just a simple mismatch. Marley, Tess warned, but I couldn't stop now. These markers show a complete genetic impossibility. According to this data, Reggie can't be your biological father. The silence that followed was deafening. Jasper stared at the screen, then at me, his face draining of color. That's impossible, he whispered. There must be a mistake. I ran the tests 3 times. I reached for the old photograph. And then I found this. Jasper took the photo, his hands trembling slightly. When was this? Summer of '93. 9 months before you were born. The lab door burst open. Lorraine stood there, breathing hard like she'd run all the way from the parking lot. That's enough, she snapped. Jasper, come with me. Now, did you know? Jasper's voice was barely audible. All this time, did you know? Lorraine's face hardened. This isn't the place. It's a simple question, Mother. Did you know? Everything I did was to protect you, she said, her composure cracking. To protect our family name. By lying to me my entire life? Jasper's laugh was hollow. Who is my real father? Lorraine's eyes darted to the photo in his hands, then to me. This is your fault, she hissed. You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? Just like your mother, always destroying everything she touches. What does my mother have to do with this? I demanded, but something in Lorraine's expression made my blood run cold. Ask her about Thomas Bennett, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Ask her what really happened the night he disappeared. The name hit me like a physical blow. Thomas Bennett, I'd seen it before in old newspaper clippings I'd found while researching the Caldwell family history. He'd been Reggie's business partner until he vanished without a trace 30 years ago. Jasper looked between us, his world visibly crumbling. I need some air, he muttered, heading for the door. Jas, wait. I reached for him, but he pulled away. Don't, he said. Just don't. After he left, Lorraine turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You wanted the truth? Congratulations. Now we all get to live with it. She walked out, leaving me standing there with Tess, the weight of unspoken secrets threatening to suffocate me. Thomas Bennett, I said quietly. Why does that name feel important? Tess was already typing on her computer. Because according to this old article, he was last seen leaving a meeting with Reggie Caldwell and a nurse named Evelyn Finch. My mother. The night before she left town, pregnant with me. The truth wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was dangerous. I found my mother in her garden, methodically pulling weeds like her world wasn't about to implode. The newspaper clipping about Thomas Bennett felt heavy in my pocket. Who was he? I asked without preamble. Mom's hands stilled in the dirt. She didn't turn around. Who? Thomas Bennett. Reggie's missing business partner. The man who disappeared the night before you left town, pregnant with me. The trowel in her hand clattered to the ground. When she finally faced me, her expression was one I'd never seen before. Raw fear. Where did you hear that name? Lorraine Caldwell seemed pretty interested in what you might know about his disappearance. Mom stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. Come inside. In her kitchen, she pulled a dusty box from the top shelf of her pantry. Inside was a stack of letters, all addressed to Thomas Bennett. He was your father, she said quietly. And he was going to leave everything, his family, his share of the business, to be with us. Her hands trembled as she sorted through the letters. The night he disappeared, he was meeting with Reggie to sign over his part of the company. I was supposed to meet them afterward, but when I got there, she swallowed hard. There was blood in Reggie's office. Not much, but enough. My phone buzzed, another message from Jasper. We need to talk. About everything. Did Reggie kill him? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know. Mom's eyes filled with tears. But Lorraine was there that night too. She saw me outside the office. The next day, she came to my apartment with an envelope full of cash and a warning. Leave town or she'd tell the police I was involved. So you ran. I ran to protect you. She grabbed my hand. Marley, you need to stop digging. These people, they're dangerous when they're cornered. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Felicity. Meet me at the hospital. There's something you need to see. I have to go, I said, standing. Marley, please. Did you ever think that maybe the truth would protect me better than lies? At the hospital, I found Felicity in Reggie's room. He was asleep, machines beeping steadily around him. Look at this, she said, handing me a folder. Inside were more blood test results, not Jasper's but Reggie's. These patterns, I muttered, scanning the data. They're similar too. To yours, Felicity finished. I had the lab run a comparison. Marley, Reggie isn't just Jasper's uncle. He's your father. The room spun. That's impossible. My father was Thomas Bennett. That's what Evelyn believed. But Reggie, he and your mother. It was before Thomas disappeared. A harsh laugh from the doorway made us both jump. Lorraine stood there, her perfect makeup unable to hide her fury. So now you know, she said. The great Reggie Caldwell, sleeping with his partner's girlfriend while playing the devoted family man. And you, she pointed at me, you're the living proof of his betrayal. Does Jasper know? I asked. Know what? That his fiancée is his cousin? That his whole life is built on lies. Lorraine's smile was cruel. Not yet. But imagine what it would do to him. You can't. Can't what? Tell the truth? Isn't that what you wanted? She stepped closer. Here's the deal. Walk away from Jasper, from all of this, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of family they're really part of. Behind her, Reggie's monitors started beeping faster. His eyes were open, watching us. Enough, he rasped. But the truth was already unraveling, spinning out of control. I looked at my father, not Thomas Bennett, but Reggie Caldwell, and saw 30 years of secrets threatening to destroy everyone I loved. The question wasn't whether to tell Jasper anymore. The question was, who would break his heart first? The hospital room felt smaller with each passing second as Reggie struggled to sit up in his bed. Lorraine moved to stop him, but he waved her away. Get out, he wheezed. Both of you. I need to speak with Marley alone. Lorraine's face twisted. You're not thinking clearly. No. His voice carried the authority of a man who'd spent decades giving orders. After they left, silence stretched between us like a chasm. I looked at his monitors. Anywhere but his face. I should have told you years ago, he finally said. Which part? That you're my father? Or that you killed Thomas Bennett? His heart rate spiked on the monitor. Is that what Evelyn thinks? That I killed him? Did you? No. He closed his eyes. But I know who did. Before he could continue, Jasper appeared in the doorway. His face was ashen, his phone clutched in his hand. I just got the strangest call from Mother, he said. Something about DNA tests and family secrets. His eyes moved between us. What's going on? My throat closed up. Behind Jasper, I saw Lorraine smirking from the hallway. Son, Reggie started. Don't. Jasper's voice cracked. Just tell me the truth. All of it. Reggie's monitors began beeping faster. A nurse rushed in, checking his vitals. You need to leave, she said. His blood pressure's too high. Not until someone explains. The machines erupted in alarm. Reggie clutched his chest, gasping. Medical staff flooded the room, pushing us into the hallway. Code blue, someone shouted. Jasper grabbed my arm. What did you do? I didn't. First the blood tests, then Mother's call, now this? His fingers dug into my skin. What are you trying to prove? That everything you think you know is a lie. The words burst out before I could stop them. His grip loosened. What? Reggie isn't your father, Jazz. He's mine. The color drained from his face. Behind us, the medical team was still working on Reggie, their shouts echoing through the corridor. That's impossible, Jasper whispered. The genetic tests prove it. And there's more. Thomas Bennett. Stop. He backed away. Just stop. Jasper, please. We're cousins. His laugh was hollow. All this time, were you investigating me? Using your science to what? Expose my family. I was trying to understand my own family. Well, congratulations. His voice was ice. You've destroyed both of them. From the hospital room came the long, steady tone of a flatline. Time of death, 9:47 p.m., someone announced. Jasper's face crumpled. He turned and ran down the hallway as doctors emerged from Reggie's room, shaking their heads. Lorraine appeared at my side. "Are you happy now?" she hissed. "You've killed him, just like your mother killed Thomas." I spun to face her. "What did you say? Oh, you didn't know that part?" Her smile was venomous. "Ask dear Evelyn about the syringe they found in Thomas's office. The one with her fingerprints on it." My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Don't trust Lorraine. She's the one who killed Thomas." I have proof. But when I looked up, Lorraine was already walking away, her heels clicking on the hospital floor like a countdown. Behind me, they were covering Reggie's body. My father, the man who might have finally told me the truth about that night 30 years ago. I stood alone in the hallway, caught between my dead father and my fleeing almost husband, while 30 years of lies unraveled around me. Somewhere in this mess was the truth about Thomas Bennett's death, but finding it might cost me everything I had left. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. "I know what really happened that night. Meet me at the old factory. Come alone." The choice was simple: walk away and lose everything, or dive deeper and risk destroying what little remained of both families. I headed for my car. Some truths are worth burning for. The old factory loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like jagged teeth. I killed my car's headlights and checked my phone one last time. 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Tess, and a single text from Jasper. "Don't do anything stupid." Too late for that. A figure emerged from the shadows near the loading dock. Felicity, still wearing her hospital clothes. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "You know what happened to Thomas Bennett." She nodded toward the rusted door. "Better show you." Inside, moonlight filtered through the holes in the roof, casting strange shadows across abandoned machinery. Felicity led me to an old office, pulling a weathered envelope from her purse. "Lorraine didn't just kill Thomas," she said. "She killed your father too. Reggie died of organ failure, after 30 years of slow poisoning." Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. "I found these in her safe. Receipts for something called thallium. She's been adding it to Reggie's tea for decades." "Why?" "Because he was going to leave her for your mother." Another voice, Lorraine's, cut through the darkness. She stepped out from behind a column, holding something that glinted in the moonlight. "A gun." Always the dramatic reveal. "Felicity?" Lorraine's laugh was brittle. "Couldn't just let the past stay buried? Like you buried Thomas?" I asked. "Thomas was a mistake. He found out what I was planning for Reggie and threatened to expose me." She moved closer, the gun steady. "But Reggie? That was art. Slow, untraceable, until you started digging." Footsteps echoed behind me. Jasper appeared, his face a mask of horror. "Mother." "Jasper." Lorraine's composure cracked. "You weren't supposed to be here." I followed Marley. His voice was hollow. I don't know what I thought. But not this. "Everything I did was for you," Lorraine insisted. "To protect your inheritance, your future." "By killing my father?" His laugh was bitter. "Which one? The man who raised me, or my real father?" "Thomas was weak," Lorraine spat. "He would have ruined everything. Just like she's trying to do." The gun swung toward me. "You want to know the truth, Jasper?" Felicity pulled out another paper. "Your real father was Thomas Bennett. And Lorraine killed him the night he was going to tell you." The gun wavered. "Shut up." "That's why she hates Marley so much," Felicity continued. "Because Marley is living proof of what Reggie did, sleeping with Evelyn while Thomas was falling for Lorraine." "Stop." Lorraine's finger tightened on the trigger. I saw it then. The same desperate need for control that had driven her to poison her husband, to kill Thomas, to manipulate everyone around her for decades. "You can't shoot all of us," I said quietly. "And you can't bury this truth. Watch me." She aimed at my heart. The gunshot was deafening. Lorraine screamed, the gun flying from her hand. Blood bloomed on her shoulder. My mother stepped from the shadows, holding a small revolver. 30 years ago, you made me run," she said. "Not this time." Police sirens wailed in the distance. Jasper moved toward his mother, but stopped, his face conflicted. "I called them," he said. When I followed Marley, I recorded everything. Lorraine lunged for her dropped gun. Another shot rang out, this time from a police officer entering through the back door. As they led Lorraine away in handcuffs, Jasper turned to me. We're not cousins. No. But we're still tangled in this mess. Yes. He looked at the factory's broken windows, at the moonlight painting shadows across 3 decades of secrets. I don't know if I can. I know, I said. Neither do I. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just shows you how trapped you really are. Behind us, evidence teams began documenting 30 years of carefully constructed lies. Ahead of us lay the wreckage of 2 families bound by blood, betrayal, and a truth that none of us had wanted to find. 6 months after Lorraine's arrest, I stood in front of Reggie's grave with a handful of white roses. The autumn wind scattered leaves across the fresh dirt of Thomas Bennett's newly discovered remains, finally laid to rest in the plot next door. Ready? Jasper's voice was soft behind me. I nodded, placing the roses on both graves. We hadn't spoken much since that night at the factory, both needing time to process the wreckage of our shared history. But yesterday, he'd called. They're reading the will today, he said now, hands in his pockets. You should be there. The lawyer's office felt too small for the weight of everything that had happened. Felicity sat quietly in the corner while my mother held my hand. The envelope the lawyer produced bore Reggie's signature, dated just hours before his death. To my children, he began, both the one I raised and the one I should have. I squeezed Mom's hand as the lawyer detailed Reggie's final wishes. The eco-friendly store chain would be split equally between Jasper and me. But it was the second envelope that changed everything. In the event of my death, the lawyer read, this evidence should be turned over to the authorities. Inside were documents proving Lorraine had been embezzling from the company for years, funneling money into offshore accounts. The final piece of revenge from a dying man. He knew, Jasper said quietly, about the poisoning. He was gathering evidence all along. After the reading, Jasper and I walked through the park where we'd had our first date. The autumn colors reminded me of that night, before we knew we were part of a tragedy 30 years in the making. I found my father's journals, Jasper said suddenly. Thomas Bennett's, I mean. He wrote about you, about hoping to be there when you were born. My throat tightened. What are we supposed to do with all this? Maybe it's not about doing anything. He stopped walking. Maybe it's about accepting that our parents were just people, making terrible decisions out of love and fear and jealousy. A text buzzed on my phone. News from the prosecutor. Lorraine had accepted a plea deal. 20 years for 2 murders and 3 decades of poisoning her husband. She's not contesting anything, I told Jasper. Good. His voice was firm. Some truths shouldn't stay buried. We reached the pond where he'd proposed, back when our biggest worry was whether his mother would approve of my dress. I've been thinking, he said, about that genetic research project you started before all this. The one about inherited traits. I smiled despite myself. Bit close to home now. Maybe that's why it matters. He turned to face me. We're not our parents' mistakes, Marley. We're what we choose to do with the truth. And what do we choose? Instead of answering, he pulled out a small box. Not a ring this time, but a key. The old lab at the store's headquarters, he explained. We could turn it into a genetic research facility. Use our inheritance to help people understand their own stories. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. But maybe it was something better, a way to build something new from the ashes of our shared past. Partners, he asked. Partners, I agreed. Later that night, I found one last letter from Reggie, hidden in the will's envelope. The truth is both poison and cure, he'd written. Choose wisely which one you make it. I looked at the key in my hand, thinking about DNA and destiny, about choices and chances. Jasper and I might never fully untangle the roots of our family tree, but maybe we could grow something new, something honest, from its twisted branches. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying the past. Sometimes it's about building a future strong enough to bear its weight. I picked up my phone and called Jasper. It was time to begin again. I never expected to find my father's last words in the false bottom of his old cigar box. Not on what was supposed to be a simple afternoon of sorting through his belongings with my fiancé Callum, but there it was, a cream-colored envelope with my name written in Dad's distinctive scrawl. My name is Rowan, and until that moment, I thought I had processed my grief over losing my father 6 months ago. I was wrong. "What's that, darling?" Callum asked, peering over my shoulder as I held the envelope. His cologne, usually comforting, felt suddenly overwhelming in the stuffy attic of my childhood home. "I'm not sure." My fingers trembled as I traced Dad's handwriting. It was hidden in his favorite cigar box. Callum reached for the envelope, but I instinctively pulled it closer. Something about finding this letter, this secret, made me want to keep it to myself. Just for a moment. "Come on, love. Share with the class," he said with that charming smile that usually melted my defenses. But not this time. "I think I need some air," I managed, already heading for the attic stairs. "Could you finish boxing up the rest?" I didn't wait for his response. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I made my way to Dad's study, the one room in the house that still felt like him. The leather chair creaked as I sat behind his massive oak desk, the envelope now feeling heavier than it should. Inside, I found 2 pages filled with Dad's precise handwriting. "My dearest Rowan, if you're reading this, then either I'm gone or you've become as nosy as your mother. I'm betting on the former, though I hope I'm wrong. There are things I need to tell you, things I should have said while I was alive. But timing and courage failed me, and now I can only hope this letter finds you before it's too late." You're probably wondering why I hid this letter. The truth is, I've discovered something that changes everything, about our family's legacy, about the people close to you, and about the fortune everyone thinks I've left behind. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. They've always been sharper than mine. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Watch carefully those who seem most interested in what I've left behind. Not everything or everyone is what they appear to be. In my office safe combination your birthday, you'll find documents that will explain everything. But be discreet. Share this information with no one except your mother. She knows more than she lets on. Most importantly, remember that real wealth isn't always measured in dollars and cents. Sometimes it's measured in the wisdom to know who to trust. I love you, my girl. Stay strong. Dad. I read the letter 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each pass. What was Dad trying to tell me? And why the secrecy? A floorboard creaked behind me, and I quickly folded the letter, shoving it into my pocket. Callum appeared in the doorway, his smile slightly strained. "Found you," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Everything okay?" "You rushed out rather quickly." "Just needed a moment," I replied, forcing a smile. "Dad stuff, you know? More emotional than I expected." He nodded sympathetically, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. Or maybe it was just Dad's words making me paranoid. "Speaking of your father's things," Callum said, his tone carefully casual. "Have you given any more thought to when we might meet with the estate lawyer? Just to get everything sorted before the wedding." The question seemed innocent enough, but combined with Dad's warning, it hit differently. Why was my fiancé so interested in my father's estate? "Soon," I said vaguely, my hand unconsciously touching the letter in my pocket. "There's still a lot to process." As Callum nodded and turned to leave, I glanced at the painting behind Dad's desk, the one concealing his safe. Whatever secrets lay behind it would have to wait until I was alone. But one thing was certain, nothing about this felt right. And Dad had taught me to trust my gut. I barely slept that night, Dad's letter burning a hole in my thoughts. The next morning, as I opened my boutique, my phone buzzed with a message from Callum. "Mother insists on treating you to lunch. The plaza at 1? She won't take no for an answer." Great. Just what I needed. An afternoon with Gwendolyn Hayes and her surgical smile. The morning crawled by as I helped customers, my mind elsewhere. At 12:55, I walked into the plaza's restaurant, spotting them immediately. Gwendolyn rose to greet me, her designer outfit perfectly coordinated, not a silver hair out of place. "Darling," she air-kissed both my cheeks. "You look exhausted. Wedding planning keeping you up?" "Just busy with the boutique," I said, sliding into my seat. Callum squeezed my hand under the table, but something felt off about his touch. "Speaking of the boutique," Gwendolyn said, sipping her martini, "Callum tells me you're still operating out of that quaint little space downtown. Have you considered expanding? Now that you'll have access to more." Resources. I felt my shoulders tense. The current location works perfectly for my needs. But surely with your father's estate settled, Callum began. Which hasn't happened yet. I cut in sharper than intended. The waiter's arrival provided a welcome interruption. Throughout lunch, Gwendolyn steered the conversation repeatedly toward my father's business dealings, each question wrapped in a layer of saccharine concern. Arthur was such a brilliant businessman. He must have taught you so much about investing, dear. Dad believed in learning by doing, I replied carefully. He let me make my own mistakes. How noble, Gwendolyn said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Though I hope he left you better prepared for managing his estate. Such responsibility can be overwhelming for someone used to running a small shop. My phone buzzed, a message from my mother. Need to see you. Important. Come by the house after work. Excuse me, I said, standing abruptly. Emergency at the boutique. I need to go. But we haven't discussed the wedding venue options, Gwendolyn protested. Another time. I grabbed my purse, avoiding Callum's questioning look. As I reached the restaurant's entrance, I realized I'd forgotten my scarf. Turning back, I froze at the sound of their voices from around the corner. She's becoming difficult, Gwendolyn hissed. If she starts digging too deeply before the wedding. I've got it under control, Mother, Callum interrupted. Once we're married, accessing the estate will be simple. Rowan trusts me, does she? That display just now suggests otherwise. We can't afford another failure, Callum. The bank won't extend. I said I've got it handled, Callum snapped. Just stick to the plan. My hands shook as I pushed through the revolving door into the street. The cool air did nothing to calm the nausea rising in my throat. Dad's warning echoed in my head. Watch carefully those who seem most interested in what I've left behind. At 6, I pulled up to my childhood home, finding Mom in the garden. She looked up from her roses, her expression grave. I found something in Dad's study, she said without preamble. Something you need to see. She led me inside, pulling out a folder filled with bank statements and legal documents. Your father knew something was coming. He started moving assets around 3 months before he died. What are you saying? I'm saying the estate everyone's so interested in, it's not what they think. She hesitated. And Callum's family? They're not who they pretend to be. Mom, what do you know about them? She opened her mouth to answer, but her phone rang, Gwendolyn's name flashing on the screen. Mom declined the call with a grimace. She's been calling all day, wanting to catch up, Mom said. Listen to me carefully, Rowan. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And whatever you do, don't tell them about. The doorbell rang, cutting her off. Through the front window, I caught a glimpse of Callum's familiar silhouette. Back door, Mom whispered, shoving the folder into my hands. Go. We'll talk tomorrow. As I slipped out through the garden, I heard Callum's voice. Evening, Lila. Is Rowan here? We need to discuss the wedding plans. I clutched the folder to my chest, my engagement ring suddenly feeling like a dead weight on my finger. What exactly had I gotten myself into? I spent the night poring over the documents Mom had given me, each page revealing another crack in the perfect facade of my life. By morning, my dining room table looked like a crime scene investigation, with papers spread everywhere and my father's letter propped against an empty wine glass. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. Through the peephole, I saw Mom, looking like she hadn't slept either. You need to see this, she said, brushing past me with a laptop. I've been up all night digging through your father's old emails. The Hayes family, they've done this before. She pulled up article after article. Different names, different cities, but the same pattern. Wealthy families, sudden marriages, mysterious bankruptcies. They're not even using their real names, Mom said, her voice tight. Gwendolyn Hayes was Gwendolyn Porter 5 years ago. And Callum? My phone buzzed. Callum's face lit up the screen. Don't answer, Mom whispered. I let it go to voicemail, but my hands were shaking. I need to check the safe, I said. Dad's safe in his study. He mentioned it in the letter. 20 minutes later, we stood in Dad's study. I entered my birthday into the safe's keypad, hearing the satisfying click. Inside, we found more documents, a USB drive, and a small red notebook. Your father's private ledger, Mom said, reaching for it. The front door opened downstairs. Callum's voice echoed through the house. Rowan? Your car's outside. Are you here? Mom shoved the notebook into my hands. Backstairs. Go. I'll handle him. I slipped out just as Callum's footsteps reached the study. Lila. I didn't expect to find you here. My house, remember? The better question is why you're here, letting yourself in without knocking. Their voices faded as I made my way through the garden. In my car, I opened the notebook with trembling fingers. Numbers, dates, and names filled the pages. But one entry made my blood run cold. Hayes connection confirmed. Same group from the Morrison case. Protecting Rowan must come first. My phone buzzed again, a text from Callum. Where are you? We need to talk about the wedding. Mother's worried you're having doubts. Another text followed. By the way, did you remove anything from your father's study? Some papers seemed to be missing. The calm mask I'd been wearing cracked. I started my car and drove to the one place I could think clearly, my boutique. But as I unlocked the door, I found Gwendolyn waiting inside. Security let me in, she said smoothly. We need to talk, dear. How did you know you'd come here? You're so like your father, always retreating to work when things get complicated. Her smile turned sharp. He did the same thing, right before he died. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. What do you know about my father's death? Only that stress can do terrible things to a person's heart. She examined her manicured nails. Especially when they're trying to protect certain secrets. My phone buzzed again. Callum, found the safe open. Mother's waiting at your shop. Let's talk this through like family. Gwendolyn continued. Marriages are about trust. About sharing everything, including burdens, secrets, inheritances. I thought about Dad's warning, about Mom's discoveries, about the notebook burning a hole in my bag, about all the signs I'd ignored because I wanted to believe in love. You're right, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Let's talk about trust. And about the Morrison case. Gwendolyn's perfectly composed face flickered for just a moment. I don't know what you're. Or should I call you Mrs. Porter? I pulled out my phone, showing her the articles Mom had found. That was your name when you pulled this same scam in Seattle, wasn't it? The shop's door chimed. Callum walked in, his face dark. Rowan, whatever you think you know. I know enough, I cut him off, backing toward my office. And soon everyone else will too. I hadn't planned what to say next. But as I looked at their faces, Gwendolyn's mask of concern cracking, Callum's charm turning to something uglier, I realized Dad had been preparing me for this moment all along. The question was, what would I do with the truth? I decided to play their game. After the confrontation at my boutique, I pretended to accept Callum's explanations, his promises, his lies. But I kept digging, and what I found made my stomach turn. The USB drive from Dad's safe contained emails, hundreds of them. Correspondence between Dad and someone named Marcus Morrison. As I read through them late one night, my hands started shaking. Arthur, they're getting closer. Gwendolyn Porter and her son have already emptied the Peterson account. Sarah Peterson killed herself last week. We can't let them do this to another family. My phone lit up with a text from Callum. Late meeting. Rain check on dinner. I grabbed my keys and drove to his office building downtown. His car was there, but the lights were off in his window. The security guard recognized me. Mr. Hayes left about an hour ago with a woman. Headed toward the Archer Hotel. The Archer. Of course. Where else would you take your secret girlfriend while your fiancé sits at home, reading about how you destroyed other families? I found his car in the hotel parking lot. Sitting there, watching the entrance, I felt oddly calm, like everything was finally making sense. The rushed engagement, the constant questions about Dad's estate, the way he always changed the subject when I mentioned prenuptial agreements. My phone buzzed. Mom, don't do anything rash. Come home. There's more you need to know. But I was already walking into the hotel, Dad's voice echoing in my head. Trust your instincts. The desk clerk didn't even hesitate when I mentioned being Callum's fiancé. Oh yes, Mr. Hayes is in the bar with Miss Peterson. Peterson. Like Sarah Peterson, who killed herself. They were sitting in a corner booth, heads close together. The woman was young, beautiful, and wearing an engagement ring that looked exactly like mine. I walked straight to their table, phone recording in my pocket. Callum, darling. Funny running into you here during your late meeting. He jumped like he'd been shocked. Rowan. I can explain. Let me guess, I said, turning to the woman. He told you about his family's investment firm? About how he could help manage your inheritance. And of course, he fell madly in love with you along the way. The woman's face went pale. Who are you? I'm his fiancé. One of them anyway. And I'm guessing you're related to Sarah Peterson. My sister, she whispered. How did you? Because my father tried to stop them before they killed her. I pulled out my phone, showing her the emails. They've done this before. Multiple times. Callum's charm vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. You've been going through private documents? Funny how you're more worried about that than being caught with your other fiancé. He grabbed my arm, fingers digging in. Let's discuss this privately. Take your hand off her. The new voice belonged to a man standing behind us, tall, gray-haired, familiar from photos in Dad's emails. Marcus Morrison. Miss Everly, he said, your father asked me to watch over you if anything happened to him. I've been waiting for you to figure it out. Callum's grip tightened. This is a private matter. Actually, said another voice mom, walking in with two police detectives, it's now a criminal matter. Fraud, theft, and conspiracy charges tend to be very public. Callum released my arm, his face twisting. You don't understand. My mother is already in custody, one detective said. We picked her up trying to access your father's business accounts 20 minutes ago. As they led Callum away, I sat down heavily in the booth. The other woman, Peterson's sister, was crying quietly. I almost fell for it too, I told her. They're very good at what they do. Mom sat beside me, holding my hand. Your father would be proud. He spent years trying to expose them. Did they? I couldn't finish the question. We can't prove they caused your father's heart attack, Marcus said quietly. But the stress of trying to protect you from them certainly didn't help. I twisted my engagement ring off my finger, feeling its weight one last time. Then let's finish what Dad started. The ring clattered onto the table, and with it, the last of my illusions about love and trust. But something stronger was taking their place, a determination to make things right, to protect others from falling into the same trap. Dad had tried to warn me. Now it was my turn to warn others. The morning after Callum's arrest, I sat in Marcus Morrison's office, surrounded by evidence of my father's secret crusade. Files, photos, and financial records covered every surface, each telling a story of another family destroyed by the Hayes schemes. Your father wasn't just tracking them, Marcus said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. He was building a case. But he needed absolute proof of their connection to Sarah Peterson's death. I opened the folder, finding photographs of Callum with different women, all wearing similar engagement rings. All from wealthy families. All now bankrupt or worse. Why didn't Dad just go to the police? Marcus's expression darkened. He tried. But Gwendolyn had connections in high places. Each time we got close, charges would mysteriously disappear. Witnesses would recant. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We should talk. About Arthur. About what really happened to him. Gee. Gwendolyn, I whispered, showing Marcus the message. He reached for his phone, but I stopped him. Wait. Maybe we should hear what she has to say. It's too dangerous. Dad died trying to stop them. I need to know why. The county jail's visiting room was cold and sterile. Gwendolyn sat across from me, her designer outfit replaced by an orange jumpsuit, but her composure remained intact. I knew you'd come, she said, studying me. You have your father's curiosity. His determination. It's what got him killed, you know. My hands clenched under the table. What do you mean? Arthur was getting too close. He'd discovered our offshore accounts, our connections to certain influential people. People who couldn't afford exposure. She leaned forward. But he made a mistake. He tried to warn the wrong person. Who? Check his calendar for March 15th. The day before his heart attack. Her smile turned predatory. But be careful, dear. Some truths are better left buried. Back at Dad's house, I found his old planner in his desk. March 15th had a single entry. Dinner, Judge Matthews. My blood ran cold. Judge Matthews, the same judge who had dismissed 3 cases against the Hayes family. Mom appeared in the doorway. I was hoping you wouldn't find that. You knew. Your father told me everything the night before he died. He was going to expose Judge Matthews' connection to Gwendolyn. But someone warned them. I stared at her, realization dawning. The morning of his heart attack, you said he had a breakfast meeting with his old friend from the DA's office. Mom's voice cracked. Who happened to be Judge Matthews' brother-in-law? My phone buzzed again, Marcus. Found something in the offshore accounts. Come quickly. At his office, Marcus pulled up financial records on his computer. Look at these transfers. The morning of Arthur's death, someone moved millions between accounts. But the signature algorithm matches. Matches what? Your boutique's corporate account. Someone used your business to launder their money. And the authorization. He pointed to a familiar name on the screen. My heart stopped. The authorization came from my accountant, the one Callum had recommended when we got engaged. They were setting me up, I whispered. If Dad had exposed them, you would have gone down too. Marcus ran a hand through his gray hair. Arthur figured it out too late. He had to choose between exposing them and protecting you. My phone buzzed one last time. Another unknown number, like father, like daughter. Back off or history repeats itself. Some hearts just can't take the strain. I thought about Dad, about his final choice, about the legacy he left me, about justice and revenge, and the fine line between them. We need to end this, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Not just for Dad, but for everyone they've hurt. Marcus nodded grimly. But they're watching you now. One wrong move. Then we'll give them exactly what they're watching for. I pulled out Dad's notebook, flipping to the last page. Dad left a plan. A way to trap them all. Judges, lawyers, everyone. But it's risky. How risky? I met his eyes. I'll have to die first. The plan was insane. Dangerous. Probably illegal. But as I thought about Sarah Peterson, about my father, about all the lives destroyed by greed and corruption, I knew there was no other choice. Sometimes to serve justice, you have to be willing to lose everything. The plan was simple. Fake my own death. Make it look like another victim of the Hayes family schemes. But nothing prepares you for reading your own obituary. Tragic accident claims local businesswoman. The headline read. The article detailed how I'd apparently driven my car off Clayton Bridge after discovering irregularities in my boutique's finances. The same bridge where Sarah Peterson had died. I watched the funeral from Marcus's car, parked far enough away to stay hidden. Mom knew the truth, of course, she had to. But watching her pretend to grieve, seeing the real tears of my employees and friends, it felt like dying for real. Callum showed up in a perfectly tailored black suit, playing the devastated fiancé. Even from a distance, I could see him working the crowd, probably already sizing up his next target. They're taking the bait, Marcus said, checking his phone. Judge Matthews just called an emergency meeting with Gwendolyn's lawyer. But something felt wrong. Callum was too composed, too calculated in his movements. Like he was performing for someone. That night, I snuck into my boutique's office, using the back entrance key I'd never turned in. I needed to check the safe to make sure the evidence we'd planted was still there. The office door was already unlocked. I was wondering when you'd show up. Callum sat in my chair, his feet propped on my desk. Behind him stood Judge Matthews and two men I didn't recognize. You really are your father's daughter, Callum said, smiling that charming smile I'd once loved. He tried the same trick. Faking evidence, planning his big reveal. Right up until his heart gave out. Gave out. I kept my voice steady. You mean until you made it give out. Potassium chloride, one of the unknown men said. Untraceable in most toxicology reports. Especially when the victim has a history of heart problems. My blood ran cold. They hadn't just let Dad die. They'd murdered him. The question is, Judge Matthews said, what should we do with you? You can't touch me, I said. Everything's already been sent to the FBI. No, Callum replied, it hasn't. Because Marcus Morrison won't be delivering anything to anyone. My phone buzzed. A photo appeared, Marcus's car, wrapped around a tree. Another accident. You see, Callum continued, standing, we own this city. The police, the judges, even some of those federal agents you were counting on. Your father never understood that. But you will. The two men moved to block the door. Judge Matthews pulled out a small vial. The thing about faking your death, Callum said, is that sometimes it becomes real. I backed away, but my heel caught on the carpet. As I stumbled, I caught a glimpse of movement outside the office window, a flash of gray hair. "Before you kill me," I said, playing for time, "don't you want to know where the real evidence is?" Callum's smile faltered. "What real evidence?" "Dad's backup plan. The one even Marcus didn't know about." I forced a laugh. "Did you really think he'd trust everything to one person?" The men exchanged glances. Judge Matthews stepped forward. "Where is it?" "In a safe deposit box. Time locked. If I don't enter the code every 24 hours, everything goes public." "She's bluffing," Callum snapped, but uncertainty crept into his voice. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. "Maybe I am," I said. "Want to risk it?" Because this time, I made sure everyone would know exactly who to blame for my death. The sirens were definitely heading our way now. Judge Matthews grabbed Callum's arm. "We need to go. Now." They rushed out the back door, just as police cars screeched to a stop outside. Mom burst in through the front, followed by FBI agents. Real ones this time. "Marcus?" I asked. "Safe," Mom said, hugging me. "He called us as soon as he spotted them following you." I sagged against her, the adrenaline draining away. We'd gotten what we needed. Judge Matthews and his thugs on camera, confessing to Dad's murder. But Callum had slipped away again. "He'll be back," I said, watching the agents photograph the vial they'd left behind. "He won't be able to help himself." Mom squeezed my hand. "Then we'll be ready." But as I stood in my darkened office, surrounded by evidence of how deep the corruption went, I wondered if anyone could ever really be ready for what was coming next. 3 days after the confrontation at my boutique, Callum walked right into our trap. He showed up at Dad's estate auction, the one I'd arranged to settle outstanding debts. The great room was packed with potential buyers, but I spotted him immediately, lurking near the back. He'd grown careless, desperate, just as Dad's notes predicted he would. "Law 156, the auctioneer announced. "Arthur Everly's private safe contents, unopened. Bidding starts at 50,000. Callum's hand shot up immediately. No surprise there. He thought Dad's evidence was inside. I let him win the bid. "Congratulations, sir," I said, approaching him afterward. "Would you like to open it now?" His eyes narrowed. "You're supposed to be dead. Sorry to disappoint." Again. I gestured to the safe. "Shall we?" He followed me to a private room, where Marcus and Mom waited with the FBI agents. But Callum just smiled, that familiar, confident smile that once made me trust him. "You still don't get it, do you?" He pulled out his phone. "One call and certain judges will make sure that all evidence disappears." I opened the safe. "Like this evidence?" Inside lay a single envelope, addressed to him. "What game are you playing?" "Open it." His hands shook slightly as he tore open the envelope. Inside was a single photo Callum with Judge Matthews, taken the night of Dad's death. "There's no proof," he started. "Check your phone," Marcus said. Callum's screen lit up with a video security footage from my boutique, showing his entire confession about Dad's murder. "Already viral," I said. "Every news outlet in the country has it." "Judge Matthews was arrested an hour ago. And your mother." I paused. "Well, she made a deal." "You're lying." But sweat beaded on his forehead. "She told him everything, Callum. About Sarah Peterson, about Dad, about all of it. See, that's the thing about people like you and your mother. You never really trust each other." He lunged for the door, but FBI agents blocked his path. "One more thing," I said, pulling out Dad's notebook. "Remember when I mentioned a safety deposit box? With time-locked evidence." His face went pale. "There wasn't one. But you believed it because you knew Dad was smart enough to have a backup plan. Want to know what his real plan was?" I opened the notebook to its last page. "He knew you'd kill him eventually. Knew you'd come after me next. So he left a trail, breadcrumbs for me to follow, evidence scattered across dozens of accounts and locations, each piece meaningless alone, but together." "You're bluffing," he whispered, but his charm had cracked completely. "The auction? The safe? All staged. While you were focused on them, FBI agents were raiding every location listed in Dad's notebook. Your entire network is exposed." Callum's composure finally shattered. He spun toward me, rage replacing his usual calculated control. He deserved it. They all deserved it. These self-righteous rich families, looking down on people like us. People like you, I corrected, who think they're entitled to take whatever they want, no matter who they hurt. At least I'm honest about what I am, he snarled. You're no better, playing these games, manipulating people. The difference is I learned from the best. I stepped closer. You taught me how to lie, Callum. How to manipulate. How to make people see what I wanted them to see. I just used it better than you. As the agents led him away, he turned back one last time. Your father was weak. He died afraid. No, Mom said, speaking for the first time. He died protecting what mattered most. That's not weakness. It's the greatest strength there is. I watched them take him away, feeling neither triumph nor satisfaction, just a quiet certainty that Dad would have understood. Marcus touched my shoulder. It's over. But I knew it wasn't. Not completely. There would always be people like Callum, like Gwendolyn, like Judge Matthews. The only question was whether there would be enough people willing to stand against them. Dad had made his choice. Now I'd made mine. 6 months after Callum's arrest, I stood in Dad's study one last time. The house had sold yesterday, but there was one final thing I needed to do. The safe opened with a familiar click. Inside lay a single key I'd never noticed before, taped to the back wall. A sticky note accompanied it, for when you're ready. Dad. Mom appeared in the doorway. I wondered when you'd find that. You knew about it? She nodded. Arthur left instructions. Said you'd know when it was time. The key led us to a small law firm downtown, to a safety deposit box that had been paid up for 50 years. Inside, I found another letter. My dearest Rowan, if you're reading this, then you faced your storm and emerged stronger. I always knew you would. What you found wasn't just about justice. It was about understanding that true strength lies not in revenge, but in protecting others from experiencing the same pain. There's one last thing I need to tell you. The boutique you built? It wasn't just your dream. It was mine too. A legitimate business, built on honest work and real connections. Everything I wished I'd done differently. Check the account number below. It's your real inheritance. Not money from schemes or manipulation, but from 20 years of quiet investments in people who needed second chances. People like us. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. I love you, Dad. The account contained millions, all legitimate, all traceable to small business loans Dad had given over the years. Loans that had been paid back with interest and gratitude. That evening, I sat with Marcus in my boutique, watching the sunset through the windows. Sarah Peterson's sister called, he said. The foundation you started with your father's money? It's already helped 3 families avoid foreclosure. I nodded, thinking of all the other families out there, vulnerable to people like Callum. Dad's letter said strength lies in protection, not revenge. I think I finally understand what he meant. Speaking of Callum, Marcus hesitated. He's offering to testify against the remaining network. Wants a deal. Let him, I said. The truth matters more than punishment. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Found something else in the study. Come quick. At the house, Mom handed me a small box. Inside was Dad's old watch, the one he always wore. But something was different about it. Press the crown, Mom said. The watch face popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a micro SD card and another note. For the next time someone like them comes along. Because they always do. Love, Dad. I smiled, sliding the card into my phone. More evidence, more names, more connections. Dad's insurance policy for the future. He knew, didn't he? I asked Mom. Knew I'd have to face something like this eventually? He knew you'd be strong enough when you did. She squeezed my hand. The question is, what will you do now? I thought about the foundation, about Dad's network of quiet investments, about all the people still vulnerable to schemes and manipulation. I'm going to do what Dad did, I said. Watch. Protect. Build something real. And if someone else like Callum comes along? I touched the watch, thinking of all it represented. Not just evidence and protection, but a father's love and foresight, a legacy of quiet strength. Then they'll learn what we learned, I said. That real power isn't in taking. It's in giving people the means to protect themselves. As we locked up the house one last time, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window, Stronger now, wiser, but still my father's daughter. Still carrying his legacy, but making it my own. The next morning, I opened my boutique early. A young woman waited outside, desperate, afraid, clutching papers that looked suspiciously like the ones Callum used to prepare. "Can you help me?" she asked. "Someone said you might understand." I touched Dad's watch, feeling its weight against my wrist, and opened the door wider. "Come in," I said. "Let's talk about second chances. Some legacies, I've learned, aren't about money or revenge or even justice. They're about the choices we make when facing the darkness, and the light we choose to share afterward. Dad taught me that, and I intend to teach others." The sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. My heart hammered against my ribs as angry voices echoed through our two-story colonial. I glanced at my phone, 2:17 a.m. This wasn't their usual fighting hour. My name is Eliora, but everyone calls me Eli. At 17, I'd gotten pretty good at reading the rhythm of my parents' arguments. This one felt different, more final somehow. "How long?" My father's voice cracked with an emotion I'd never heard from him before. "How long have you been lying to me?" I crept to my bedroom door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. Mom's response was too quiet to make out, but Dad's bitter laugh cut through the silence like a knife. 12 years, Blythe? Our entire marriage has been built on lies. My stomach dropped. 12 years. The same age as my half-sister, Zara. She was sleeping over at a friend's house tonight, thankfully missing whatever storm was breaking over our family. "James, please," Mom pleaded. "I never meant to." "To what? To destroy everything? To make a fool of me?" Another crash, followed by the sound of keys jingling. "I can't even look at you right now." Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. I rushed to my window, watching as Dad stormed out to his car. The engine roared to life, tires squealing against wet pavement as he peeled away into the darkness. Mom stood in the doorway, her silhouette small and defeated in the porch light. I should have gone downstairs. Should have demanded answers. Instead, I crawled back into bed, pulling my covers up to my chin like I was still a little kid who could hide from monsters under blankets. Sleep didn't come. The next morning, everything changed. 2 police officers stood in our living room while Mom collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Their words blurred together. Wet roads, sharp turn, no guardrail. Dad's car had been found at the bottom of Miller's Ridge. "Mrs. Wyndham," one officer said gently, "I'm so sorry, but your husband didn't survive the crash." The world tilted sideways. I gripped the door frame, my knees threatening to buckle. Mom's sobs filled the room, but all I could hear was Dad's voice from last night, raw with betrayal. His final words in our house haunting me, "I can't even look at you right now." Hours passed in a fog. Relatives started arriving, aunts, uncles, family, friends. Everyone speaking in hushed tones, offering casseroles and condolences. But Grandma and Grandpa Wyndham, Dad's parents, were noticeably absent. When I asked Mom why, she just shook her head and said they were traveling. Late that afternoon, I found myself in Dad's study, breathing in the familiar scent of old books and coffee. His reading glasses still sat on his desk, next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. A photo of us caught my eye, Dad teaching me to fish when I was 12, both of us grinning at the camera with matching sunburned noses. "Eli?" Mom's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, eyes red and puffy. "Grady's coming over to help with arrangements." Grady Bellamy. Mom's friend from work who'd been spending more and more time at our house lately. Something cold settled in my chest as pieces started clicking into place. Did Dad know? The words slipped out before I could stop them. "About you and Grady?" Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. "This isn't the time, Eliora." But it was exactly the time. Dad was gone, and his last moments alive had been filled with anger and betrayal. I turned back to the photo, unable to look at her. "When will it be time, Mom? When you're ready to admit what really happened last night?" She didn't answer. Her footsteps retreated down the hall, leaving me alone with Dad's ghost and questions that would haunt me for months to come. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months after Dad's funeral, Mom married Grady in our backyard. I watched from my bedroom window as they exchanged vows under the maple tree where Dad had built my childhood swing. The same tree he'd promised to hang fairy lights in for my graduation party next spring. Mom wore a cream-colored sundress and a smile I didn't recognize. Zara scattered rose petals, beaming at her role as flower girl. The small gathering of guests, mostly Grady's friends and family, applauded as they kissed. No one seemed to notice or care that Dad's parents weren't there. That half of our family was missing. Eli? Zara's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood in my doorway, still in her pale pink dress. Mom wants you to come down for pictures. I'm not feeling well, I said, the same excuse I'd used to avoid the ceremony. Maybe later. Zara's face fell. But we're family now. Grady says. Grady isn't my father. The words came out sharper than I intended. Zara flinched and guilt twisted in my stomach. None of this was her fault. Sorry, I softened my tone. I just need some time, okay? She nodded and disappeared downstairs, where laughter and music drifted up through the floorboards. I turned back to my window, watching as Grady led Mom in their first dance. His hand rested possessively on her lower back, and something in his expression made my skin crawl. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Zara was asleep, I crept down to the kitchen for water. Voices from the living room stopped me cold. We need to discuss what to do about Elira, Grady was saying. Her attitude is affecting Zara. She's grieving, Mom replied, but her defense sounded weak. It's only been 6 months. It's been long enough. Grady's voice hardened. We're a family now, Blythe. Either she accepts that, or we need to consider other options. What do you mean, other options? My sister's running that boarding school in Vermont. They have openings for the spring semester. The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the tile floor. Silence fell in the living room. Eli? Mom called out. Is that you? I didn't answer. Instead, I ran back upstairs, my bare feet silent on the carpet. Behind me, I heard their muffled argument resume. The next morning, I woke to find boxes stacked in the hallway. Grady was directing movers, pointing out which furniture stayed and which went. What's happening? I asked Mom, who was supervising from the doorway. Grady's moving in properly now, she said, not meeting my eyes. We're making space for his things. I watched as they dismantled Dad's study, packing away his books and awards. His presence being erased piece by piece. When they reached for the fishing photo on his desk, I snapped. That's mine, I said, snatching it before the mover could wrap it in paper. Eli, Mom started, but Grady cut her off. Let her have it, he said smoothly. She'll need something for her dorm room, after all. My blood ran cold. So they'd already decided. That afternoon, I found Dad's old laptop buried in one of the boxes headed for storage. I smuggled it to my room, desperate for any connection to him. When I powered it on, a document was still open, an email draft dated the night he died. Mavis, it began. I know why you've been trying to warn me about Blythe. Tonight confirmed everything. I need your help protecting. The message cut off there. My hands shook as I read it again. Grandma had tried to warn him? About what? A knock at my door made me quickly close the laptop. Grady stood there, his smile not reaching his eyes. Family meeting downstairs, he said. We need to discuss your future. I nodded, my mind racing. Dad's unfinished email felt like a key to a door I didn't even know existed. Whatever Grandma Mavis had tried to tell him, whatever truth she knew, I had to find out. But first, I needed to stop them from shipping me off to Vermont. The family meeting about Vermont never happened. Instead, I spent the night digging through Dad's laptop, looking for any connection to my grandparents. My search led me to a password-protected folder labeled Family Matters. After 3 tries, I cracked it my birthday, followed by Zara's. Inside, I found dozens of emails between Dad and Grandma Mavis, dating back 12 years. The most recent ones made my stomach churn. James, the DNA test results confirm what we suspected, Grandma had written. You need to confront Blythe about Zara. And about Grady. This deception has gone on long enough. The timestamp showed Dad had read this email the morning before he died. A soft knock interrupted my reading. "Eli?" Zara's voice came through the door. "Can I come in?" I quickly closed the laptop. "Sure." She slipped inside, clutching her pillow. "I had a bad dream. Can I sleep here?" Looking at her now, knowing what I knew, made my heart ache. She wasn't just my half-sister, she was Grady's daughter. Dad had raised her believing she was his, while Grady and Mom kept their secret. "Of course," I said, moving over. As she settled in beside me, I noticed she was wearing Dad's old college sweatshirt as a nightgown. The sight made me want to cry. "Eli," she whispered in the darkness. "Why doesn't Grady want you to stay?" My breath caught. "What do you mean?" I heard him talking to Mom. "He said you're too much like Dad, that it's not healthy for anyone." Before I could respond, footsteps creaked in the hallway. The door opened, revealing Grady's silhouette. "Zara," his voice was tight. "What are you doing in here?" "I had a nightmare. Back to your room." "Now." She scrambled out of bed, shooting me an apologetic look before scurrying past him. Grady lingered in the doorway. "We need to establish some boundaries," he said. "Zara's impressionable. She doesn't need to be influenced by your attitude." "You mean she doesn't need to remember Dad?" The words felt dangerous in my mouth, but I couldn't stop them. "Or is there something else you're worried about?" His expression shifted, something cold flickering behind his eyes. "What exactly are you implying?" "Nothing," I said, but my hand instinctively moved to cover Dad's laptop. "Just wondering why you're so eager to send me away." He stepped into my room, closing the door behind him. "Listen carefully, Eliora. Your mother and I are trying to build something here. A fresh start. If you can't be part of that, there are other options. Like Vermont? Like wherever necessary." His gaze fell on the laptop. "What's that?" "Schoolwork. On your father's computer?" He moved closer. "Hand it over." "No." I clutched it to my chest. "This isn't a request." He reached for it, but I scrambled backward. "Get out of my room." The door burst open. Mom stood there, looking between us with wide eyes. "What's going on?" "Your daughter's been going through James's personal files," Grady said. "Who knows what she's found?" Mom's face paled. "Eli, give me the laptop." "Why?" "Afraid of what else I might discover." I opened it, hands shaking. "Like these emails from Grandma Mavis? Or the DNA test results?" The color drained from Mom's face. Grady's hands clenched into fists. "How long were you going to keep lying?" I demanded. "Dad knew, didn't he? That night, when he left, he finally figured it out. About you too. About Zara." "Enough." Grady's shout made me flinch. "Blythe, handle this." "Now." Mom stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Sweetheart, please. It's complicated." "No, it's really not." I slammed the laptop shut. "Dad died thinking his whole life was a lie. And you're still lying, aren't you? To Zara, to everyone. Vermont isn't optional anymore," Grady cut in. "You're leaving next week." I looked at Mom, waiting for her to defend me. She just stood there, silent tears running down her face. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "But first, I'm calling Grandma Mavis." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Mom's gasp told me everything I needed to know. There were more secrets to uncover, and my grandparents held the key to all of them. Finding Grandma Mavis's number wasn't hard. It was still in Dad's phone contacts. What was hard was working up the courage to call while Grady and Mom were downstairs, probably plotting my exile to Vermont. I paced my room, phone clutched in my sweaty palm. The sound of Zara practicing piano drifted up through the floorboards, the same melody she'd been working on since Dad taught it to her last year. The thought of leaving her behind made my chest ache. Finally, I pressed call. 3 rings. 4. Then, hello? Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm and strong. "Grandma?" Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Elira? Is it really you?" "Yeah." My voice cracked. "I found Dad's emails. About the DNA test. About Mom and..." "Where are you?" She cut in, urgency replacing warmth. "Are you at home?" "Yes, but..." "Listen carefully, sweetheart. Don't tell anyone you called me. Your grandfather and I are 3 hours away. We can be there by. The line went dead. I spun around to find Grady in my doorway, his hand on my room's phone jack. Calling hours are over, he said, pocketing the cable. You can't keep me from talking to my grandparents. Actually, I can. He stepped closer. Your mother signed the boarding school paperwork this morning. You're leaving Sunday. That's in 2 days. Better start packing. I pushed past him into the hallway, racing downstairs to find Mom. She was in the kitchen, methodically loading the dishwasher like everything was normal. You signed the papers? I demanded. Without even talking to me? She wouldn't meet my eyes. It's for the best, Eli. You need a fresh start away from all this. All what? The truth. The past, Grady said from behind me. Which is where it needs to stay. The piano music stopped abruptly. Zara appeared in the doorway, her face pale. You're leaving? No, I said, just as Mom said yes. But why? Zara's voice trembled. Is it because of me? Because I told you about what Grady said. Zara, Grady's tone carried a warning. Go to your room. No. She moved closer to me. I don't want Eli to go. I saw something dangerous flash in Grady's eyes. He stepped toward Zara, but I moved between them. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare try to intimidate her like you do everyone else. Grady, Mom started, but he held up his hand. You want to know why your sister's leaving? He asked Zara. Show her the emails, Eli. Tell her everything you found. About her real father. About. Stop. Mom's shout made us all jump. A glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. In the silence that followed, I could hear her ragged breathing. Mom? Zara's voice was small. What's he talking about? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She had Grady's eyes. How had I never noticed before? The truth sat like poison on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. Nothing, I said finally. He's talking about nothing. Grady smiled, cold and triumphant. He knew he had me cornered. I could tell the truth and destroy Zara's world, or I could leave quietly and protect her from it. I'll go pack, I said, my voice hollow. But as I turned to leave, I caught sight of Dad's reflection in the kitchen window. No, not Dad. Grandfather August, standing on our back porch with Grandma Mavis beside him. They must have already been on their way when I called. Grady followed my gaze and cursed. Mom dropped another glass. Zara, I said quickly, remember how Dad always said the truth sets us free? She nodded. Well, I think it's time for some truth. All of it. The back door opened, and my grandparents stepped into our kitchen like avenging angels. Grandma Mavis took one look at me and opened her arms. I ran to her without hesitation, leaving chaos erupting behind me. Grandma Mavis's kitchen smelled like cinnamon and safety. I sat at her familiar oak table, watching steam rise from my tea while Grandfather August paced behind me. We'd left chaos at my house, Mom crying, Grady threatening legal action, and Zara locked in her room, refusing to speak to anyone. Your father suspected for years, Grandma said, sliding a worn leather journal across the table. But he couldn't prove anything until he found this in Blythe's desk last spring. The journal was Mom's. Inside, detailed entries chronicled her relationship with Grady, starting long before I was born. Before she even met Dad. He was going to confront them that night, Grandfather August said, his voice heavy. We begged him to wait, to let us help him gather more evidence for the divorce. Evidence? I looked up from the journal. Evidence of what? Grandma exchanged a look with Grandfather. Your father discovered some irregularities in his company's accounts. Large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts. I don't understand. Grady was your father's financial advisor before he married your mother, Grandfather explained. He'd been embezzling funds for years, using your mother's position as company secretary to cover his tracks. The room tilted sideways. Dad's accident. Might not have been an accident at all, Grandma finished softly. A sharp knock at the front door made us all jump. Through the window, I saw Mom's car in the driveway. I'll handle this, Grandfather said, moving toward the door. Wait. I stood up. I want to talk to her. Eli. She owes me the truth. All of it. Mom looked smaller somehow, standing in Grandma's living room. Her eyes were red, her hands twisting together nervously. "Where's Grady?" I asked. "At home with Zara." She swallowed hard. "He doesn't know I'm here." "Like Dad didn't know about you and Grady all those years?" She flinched. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Grady. He can be very persuasive when he wants something. Like Dad's money? Or his life." I didn't know about the money until after." She trailed off, tears spilling down her cheeks. When James confronted me that night, I panicked. I called Grady, told him everything. He said he'd handle it, but I never thought. "You never thought he'd actually kill Dad?" My voice cracked. "Or you just never thought anyone would figure it out?" "Eli, please. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but I'm still your mother." "No." The word came out sharp as glass. "My mother died the night Dad did. I just didn't know it until now." A sound from the hallway made us turn. Zara stood there, tears streaming down her face. She must have followed Mom. "Is it true?" she whispered. Did he kill James?" Mom reached for her, but Zara backed away. "Sweetheart, it's complicated." "Stop lying." Zara screamed. "Everyone just stop lying." She ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist like she used to when she was little. Despite everything, she was still my sister. Blood didn't matter. Dad had taught us that love was stronger than DNA. "What do we do now?" Zara asked, her voice muffled against my shirt. I looked at my grandparents, then at Mom, who seemed to have aged years and minutes. The journal on the table held enough evidence to destroy Grady, but using it would mean destroying what was left of our family too. "We tell the truth," I said finally. "All of it. To the police, to everyone." "Grady will never let that happen," Mom whispered. He'll what?" Grandfather's voice was steel. "Kill someone else? Try to send Eli away? We have evidence now, Blythe. Real evidence." My phone buzzed, a text from Grady. "Come home now, or everyone learns what really happened the night your father died." I showed it to the others. Mom went pale. "He's bluffing," she said, but her voice shook. "Maybe," I replied, already grabbing my keys. "But I'm done running from the truth." Grandma caught my arm. "You're not going alone." I looked at my sister, still clinging to me, then at the journal that held our father's death warrant. "No," I agreed. "We're all going. It's time to finish this." The house was dark when we pulled into the driveway. Too dark. Even the porch light was off, which Mom never allowed. Grandfather August insisted on calling the police, but I knew we couldn't wait. Every minute felt like another chance for Grady to destroy evidence, to bury the truth even deeper. "He's expecting me," I said, gripping Mom's journal in my hands. "Just me." "Absolutely not," Grandma Mavis started, but I cut her off. "Dad died trying to protect this family. I won't let that be for nothing." Before anyone could stop me, I was out of the car and up the front steps. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house felt wrong, like walking into a familiar room where all the furniture had been shifted slightly left. "Grady." My voice echoed in the darkness. "In here." His voice came from Dad's old study. I found him sitting at Dad's desk, illuminated by a single lamp. Dad's laptop was open in front of him, and beside it sat a familiar object that made my blood run cold. Dad's phone. The one the police said they never found at the crash site. Wondering how I got this? Grady's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Amazing what you can retrieve from a ravine if you know where to look." "You went back that night," I said, "to clean up evidence." "Smart girl. Just like your father." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." I remained standing. "Where's Zara?" "Safe. Away from all this mess you're creating." He leaned forward. "You know, James made the same choice you did, choosing truth over family. Look where that got him. You murdered him." I protected what was mine. His voice hardened. "Like I'm going to do right now." The front door opened. Mom's voice called out, followed by Grandma Mavis's. Grady's expression darkened. "I told you to come alone." "I did." I held up the journal. "And I brought what you really want." His eyes fixed on it. "Your mother's little diary." James was so proud of himself for finding it. It has everything. The affair, the money transfers, all of it. Hand it over. I took a step closer to his desk. Tell me what happened that night first. The whole truth. He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Your father was going to ruin everything. The life I'd built, the future I'd planned. He called that night, said he was going to the police. I couldn't let that happen. So you followed him. I tried talking sense into him first. When that failed, he spread his hands. Sometimes accidents are necessary. Footsteps approached the study. I needed to keep him talking, keep him distracted. And Mom? Did she know? Blythe knows what she needs to know. Just like you're going to forget what you think you know, unless you want Zara to grow up without both her father and her sister. The threat hung in the air between us. I thought of Zara, already losing one father, now learning the truth about another. The journal felt heavy in my hands. You're right, I said quietly. Sometimes we have to protect what's ours. I held out the journal. As Grady reached for it, I let it fall. In his moment of distraction, I lunged for Dad's phone on the desk. But Grady was faster. His hand clamped around my wrist, twisting until pain shot up my arm. The phone clattered to the floor as he yanked me forward, his other hand going to my throat. I tried to be reasonable, he snarled. Tried to give you a chance to be smart about this. Let her go. Mom's scream came from the doorway. Everything happened at once. Grady spun me around, using me as a shield. Grandfather August appeared behind Mom, holding something that glinted in the dim light. And there, in the corner of the room, stood Zara. She must have been hiding there the whole time, recording everything on her phone. It's over, Grady, I managed to say through his chokehold. The truth's already out. His grip tightened. Then I have nothing left to lose, do I? The last thing I saw was Mom lunging forward, terror in her eyes, as Grady dragged me backward toward the window. Then everything went black. I woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the sensation of someone holding my hand. For a moment, I thought it was Dad, like when I had my appendix out at 12. But when my eyes focused, I saw Grandma Mavis, her face etched with worry. Welcome back, sweetheart, she whispered. The events in Dad's study came rushing back. Grady is in custody. Grandfather August stepped into view. Zara's video and your father's phone provided enough evidence. The police are reopening James's case. My throat felt raw where Grady's hands had been. Where's Zara? Here. She appeared at my bedside, eyes red from crying. I'm so sorry, Eli. I heard him on the phone earlier, planning to send you away. I knew something was wrong, so I hid in the study and recorded everything. You saved us all, I told her, squeezing her hand. A commotion in the hallway drew our attention. Mom burst in, followed by 2 police detectives. 5 minutes, one of them said. Then we need your official statement, Mrs. Bellamy. It's Wyndham, Mom corrected sharply. I'm going back to Wyndham. She approached my bed cautiously, like I might shatter. Eli, I need to tell you something. About your father's trust fund. The one he set up for my college? No. She pulled out a familiar envelope, the one I'd seen in Dad's desk the night he died. This is his letter to you. The one Grady tried to destroy. It explains everything. With shaking hands, I opened it. Dad's familiar handwriting filled the page. My dearest Eli, if you're reading this, then my suspicions about Grady were correct. I've documented everything, the embezzlement, the threats, the affair. But more importantly, I've secured your future. The trust fund isn't just for college. It's everything I had, transferred to an account only you and your grandparents can access. I knew Grady would come after me once he discovered what I'd done. But I couldn't let him steal your future like he stole our family's trust. Protect Zara. She's innocent in all this, and she'll need her big sister more than ever. And Eli? Remember what I always told you about truth and justice? Sometimes they come at a terrible price. But they're worth fighting for. All my love. Dad. I looked up at Mom, who was crying silently. You knew about this letter? Grady found it first, she admitted. He used it to convince me to marry him. Said he'd destroy everything, the evidence, the trust fund, our family, if I didn't help him cover up what happened to James. So you chose him over the truth? Over Dad's justice? I chose what I thought would protect you and Zara. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. The detective stepped back in. Mrs. Wyndham, it's time. Mom straightened her shoulders. I'm ready to tell the truth. All of it. Wait. I caught her hand. Dad's letter. He wanted justice, but he also wanted us to heal. To be a family again. How can we? After everything? By choosing truth this time, I said. Together. Zara moved closer, taking Mom's other hand. For a moment, we stood connected, 3 generations of women choosing truth over fear. Mr. and Mrs. Wyndham, I looked at my grandparents. Will you help us? Grandma Mavis wiped her eyes. That's all we've ever wanted, dear heart. The detective cleared his throat. There's one more thing. We found something else at the house. A recording on James's phone. From that night, my heart stopped. Dad's last moments, preserved in digital memory. Do you want to hear it? The detective asked. I looked at my family, broken but healing, fractured but not destroyed. Dad's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes truth and justice come at a terrible price. But they're worth fighting for. Yes, I said firmly. We need to hear everything. Because that's what Dad taught me, that truth, no matter how painful, was the first step toward healing. And we had a lot of healing left to do. 1 year later, I stood in front of Dad's grave, brushing autumn leaves from his headstone. The trial had ended last week. Grady got 20 years for Dad's murder, with Mom receiving immunity for her testimony. The recording from Dad's phone had captured everything, including Grady's confession before he forced Dad's car off the road. Ready? Zara appeared beside me, carrying a bouquet of Dad's favorite sunflowers. She lived with me and our grandparents now, her choice after Mom started therapy and moved into a small apartment across town. We were all healing, but at different paces, in different places. Almost. I pulled out Dad's old journal, the one I'd found hidden in his desk after the trial. I want to read him something first. Zara nodded, settling cross-legged on the grass. I opened to the last entry, dated the morning of his death. My greatest fear isn't dying. It's leaving my girls without showing them that love is stronger than blood, that truth matters more than comfort. And that family isn't just who we're born to, but who we choose to become. He was right, Zara said softly. About all of it. A familiar car pulled up to the cemetery gates. Mom, right on time for our weekly visit. These meetings were still awkward, filled with careful conversations and tentative steps toward forgiveness. But we kept showing up, week after week, choosing truth over comfort, just like Dad taught us. Girls? Grandma Mavis called from behind us. Your mother's here. I closed the journal, tucking it back into my bag next to the acceptance letter from Dad's alma mater. The trust fund he'd set up would cover my tuition, but it was his words, not his money, that had guided me here. Mom approached slowly, carrying her own flowers. Her hair was graying at the temples now, and grief had etched permanent lines around her eyes. But there was something lighter about her these days, like setting down a heavy secret had allowed her to stand straighter. I found something, she said, holding out an envelope. In my old diary. Inside was a photo I'd never seen, Dad teaching me to write my name, both of us laughing as I scribbled backwards letters across his legal pad. On the back, he'd written, Eli's first story, about a family of birds who flew in different directions, but always found their way home. I was cleaning out the storage unit, Mom explained. Thought you might want it for your dorm room. My throat tightened. Next week, I'd be heading to college, leaving behind the cemetery, this town, all these ghosts. But not the truth, never that. Thanks, I managed. Then, surprising us both, I hugged her. Zara joined us, then Grandma Mavis and Grandfather August. We stood there, this patchwork family held together by choice rather than obligation, by truth rather than comfort. Later that night, as I packed my room, I found one last surprise, a sealed envelope that had fallen behind my desk. Dad's handwriting again, but this time addressed to both my daughters. Zara sat beside me as I read. My dear girls, by the time you read this, you'll understand that family isn't always what it seems. But here's what I know for certain. Love doesn't care about DNA. Truth doesn't bend to convenience. And strength isn't about never falling. It's about who helps you stand back up. Eli, protect your sister's heart. Zara, guard your sister's spirit. Together, you're stronger than any secret, any lie, any storm. And remember, sometimes the hardest paths lead us exactly where we need to be. All my love. Dad. I looked at Zara, this sister who wasn't my sister by blood, but was my sister in all the ways that mattered. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He knew, she whispered. He knew all along, and he loved us anyway. No, I corrected gently. He loved us completely. Because that was Dad's final lesson that love, like truth, doesn't need qualifiers. It simply is. And sometimes, that's enough to build a future on.